Hello, Saints. We've been looking at the epistle to the Ephesians this quarter in our lesson. And on lesson 5, we talked about the Gentiles and how it was the coming in of the Gentiles. Paul emphasizes this later on in chapter 3. But in chapter 2 of that week, we were looking at the pericope of verses 11 to 22. And there we see that it was the Gentiles all along that he was planning to bring in. In verse 19, of chapter 2, we read, "Now therefore," concluding statement, bringing in the Gentiles, "you who are no longer strangers and foreigners," referring to Gentiles, mostly you and me. There might be some people with Jewish descent or heritage, "but fellow citizens with the saints." Here, the saints is referring to the Jews. And so together we constitute the saints. "And members of the household of God, having been built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Jesus Christ himself being the chief cornerstone, in whom the whole building being fitted together grows into a holy temple in the Lord, in whom you also are being built together for a dwelling place of God and in the Spirit." Now, this idea of temple, we are his temple. Ephesians 2:6, we write that we sit with him in heavenly places. We are with him in his temple because we are his dwelling place. We see a good picture of this here back in Revelation chapter 13. Remember, chapter 13 is the beast system, the land beast and the sea beast. This is the false religion that the whole world will get caught up into. And if you get up to verse 3, we see where this is formed. "I saw one of his heads as it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world marveled and followed the beast. And so they worshiped the dragon, who gave authority to the beast." Because of this, we see verse 6 of what's going on. This is a battle between God's real people. Verse 6, "And then he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, and to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, those who dwell in heaven." His tabernacle are those who dwell in heaven. His dwelling place are those who dwell in heaven. That's you and me. Remember, we just read Ephesians 2, 6, 8. Ephesians 2, verse 6, where we sit with Christ Jesus in heavenly places. And we see this here all the way back in Daniel chapter 8. Those first verses 9 to 14 in chapter 8. Verses 9 to 12 deal with that little horn system that we see there in chapter 7. And there in chapter 7, that little horn is the one who blasphemes God, who persecutes God's people for times, and half a time, and is the one who seeks to change times and laws. We see the same picture being described here, who takes out a host of heaven, host of the stars. This is a parallel between this beast system on earth, this little horn power, and Satan and his rebellion in heaven. And we see God's people coming out on the short end of the stick. And so the angel asks there in verse 13, he says, that one angel says, "Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to that certain one who was speaking, 'How long?'" Actually, in the Hebrew, it's "till when." Not looking for a time period, he's looking for a point in time. He says, "How long will the vision be concerning the daily and the transgression of desolation, the giving of both the sanctuary and the host to be trampled underfoot?" The sanctuary and the host. The host is the army of God. And so the answer comes back on the 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. It has to do with setting the saints free. Not just about a building in heaven and cleansing of sin, but the whole process of restoration. So we find ourselves in this place in salvation history at this time to preach that last great message of Revelation 14, the three angels' messages. The last message of hope that goes out into the world, because after that, there is no other. After that, Christ comes and claims his own. We are the tabernacle of God. Let's go forth and build the kingdom.